The applause shook the glass walls of the conference hall. Not for me. For the man who had stolen everything I had built. Let's welcome the visionary founder of NovaForge Technologies, Mr. Adrian Cole. The giant screen flashed his smiling face while cameras erupted in white bursts. Investors stood. Reporters leaned forward. Employees cheered. I sat alone in the last row with an invitation that didn't even have my name printed correctly. Former consultant. Not co-founder. Not chief architect. Not the man who had worked 20-hour days for 4 years while Adrian toured conferences, pretending genius came naturally. Just former consultant. Adrian adjusted his expensive navy suit before stepping onto the stage. I owe today's success to countless mentors, he said warmly. His gaze swept across the audience. Over me. Through me. As entrepreneurs, we learn one lesson above all. He smiled. Sometimes you have to let people go for the company's future. Laughter. Applause. My chest tightened. The investors laughed with him because they didn't know that 3 months earlier he had accused me of leaking company secrets. The board believed him without hesitation. Every email, every system architecture, every sleepless night, everything I had built was now legally his. A security guard stopped beside my chair. Sir. I looked up. The organizers request that you leave. The room suddenly became silent around me. What? You aren't on the guest list anymore. Several nearby guests turned to stare. Someone whispered, Isn't that the engineer they fired? I heard he tried stealing the source code. No wonder security's here. Heat crawled across my face. Adrian paused on stage just long enough to notice. For half a second, he smiled. A tiny smile. Only I could recognize it. Victory. I stood without arguing. There was nothing left to defend. Not anymore. Rain hammered the windshield as I drove through empty streets. The radio announced NovaForge's newest funding round, raising nearly $800 million. I laughed. It sounded broken. $800 million. The recommendation engine. The cloud scaling framework. The predictive logistics platform. Every breakthrough being praised tonight had started as sketches inside my notebooks. I remembered the apartment where Adrian and I first worked. 1 desk. 2 folding chairs. Cheap instant noodles. He couldn't even write clean code. I'll handle investors, he used to grin. You build miracles. Back then I thought that was partnership. Now I understood. He had been assigning roles. Mine was to disappear when the company became valuable. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. I answered. A lawyer's calm voice greeted me. Mr. Ethan Brooks? Speaking. I'm calling regarding the civil lawsuit. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. What lawsuit? The intellectual property damages. What damages? NovaForge Technologies has filed for $112 million. Silence. The lawyer continued. They allege your consulting work after termination violated confidentiality agreements. I almost laughed again. They fired me. Nevertheless, the filing requests immediate asset preservation. My apartment. Frozen. My savings. Frozen. My accounts. Frozen. Everything. Every last dollar. They're destroying me. I'm only informing you of the filings, sir. The call ended. The traffic light turned green. I didn't move. Cars behind me blasted their horns. None of it mattered anymore. 3 weeks later, the courtroom smelled of polished wood and expensive perfume. Judge, lawyers, media. Everything happened exactly as Adrian wanted. Their evidence looked perfect. Emails, access logs, financial transfers, manufactured. I knew they were fake. I simply couldn't prove it. The verdict came quickly. Judgment against Ethan Brooks. Compensation approved. Professional restrictions. Reputational damages. The gavel struck. 1 sound. 1 life destroyed. Outside, reporters surrounded Adrian. Any comment? We're saddened. He replied with practiced regret. Ethan was like family. Family. The word cut deeper than the verdict. Because once, he had been. 6 months later, no company would hire me. No investor answered emails. Friends stopped calling. Even former co-workers crossed the street to avoid me. The internet never forgot. Corporate thief. Disgraced engineer. Failed founder. My landlord knocked gently. I'm sorry, Ethan. I know. I can't wait any longer. I nodded. He looked genuinely guilty. I wish things had gone differently. So do I. After he left, I packed the last cardboard box. Inside was an old notebook. Page after page of startup ideas. Systems. Products. Markets. Dreams. One page had Adrian's handwriting. One day we'll change the world together. I stared at it for a long time, then quietly tore the page into pieces. Outside, winter snow covered the sidewalks. Inside, there was nothing left worth carrying. By midnight, the apartment was empty. Just me. One backpack. One suitcase. One lifetime reduced to luggage. The truck came before sunrise. I accepted temporary work maintaining servers in an isolated industrial district hundreds of miles away. No ambition. No future. Only survival. Days blurred together. Machines never lied. Machines never betrayed. I almost preferred them to people. Then came the explosion. It started somewhere beneath the cooling facility. A warning siren screamed. Engineers ran. Someone shouted. Gas line. The floor shook violently. Steel twisted. Fire rushed through the corridor. I sprinted toward the emergency exit. Halfway there, a younger technician froze beneath a collapsing beam. Help! Without thinking, I turned back. The beam crushed my shoulder as I shoved him clear. Pain exploded through my body. The ceiling gave way. Flames swallowed everything. My vision blurred beneath smoke. Somewhere far away, people screamed my name. I couldn't answer. I lay staring upward through broken concrete. Snow drifted down through the shattered roof. Cold. Peaceful. Strange. So this was how it ended. Not in court. Not in revenge. Just forgotten. My breathing slowed. The last thing I thought wasn't about losing Nova Forge. It wasn't about the lawsuit. It wasn't even about Adrian. It was one simple regret. If life ever gave me another chance, I wouldn't build his dream again. Darkness closed over me. Mr. Brooks. A woman's voice. Clear. Close. Mr. Brooks, are you listening? My eyes opened. The smell hit me first. Fresh coffee. New carpet. Printer toner. No smoke. No blood. No burning steel. I blinked. A polished conference room stretched around me. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown. Across the table sat 3 venture capital partners. Beside me, Adrian, 5 years younger, wearing the same cheap gray hoodie he had practically lived in when Nova Forge existed only as sketches and impossible dreams. He nudged my elbow beneath the table. Ethan. His smile looked exactly the way it had before betrayal entered it. You're zoning out. My heartbeat thundered. The presentation slide on the screen read, Nova Forge Seed Funding Meeting. Date, April 14th. 5 years. 5 years before everything collapsed. No, 5 years before everything began. The oldest investor smiled politely. Mr. Brooks, you designed the platform architecture. Would you like to explain your scalability projections? I stared at the graph. Every number, every forecast, every optimistic promise. I remembered exactly where they led. Rapid expansion, aggressive hiring, Series A, Series B, then greed, manipulation, forgery, destruction. I slowly closed the presentation folder. I'm sorry. The investors exchanged confused glances. I won't be presenting. Adrian frowned. What are you doing? I looked directly at him. His face still carried the confidence of someone who believed I would always rescue impossible situations. In my previous life, I had. This time, I stood. I've decided not to participate. Silence. One investor laughed awkwardly. Is this a negotiation tactic? No. Adrian whispered sharply. Ethan, sit down. I won't. His expression hardened. We've worked on this for 2 years. I know. We're finally here. I know. So stop joking. I met his eyes. There was no anger inside me. Only an overwhelming calm. I'm leaving. His mouth opened. Closed. You can't. I can. We built this together. No. The word surprised even me. We built what you wanted. He stared as though hearing a foreign language. The investors shifted uncomfortably. One finally asked, Is there some internal disagreement we should know about? I answered honestly. Yes. Adrian stood. We'll take 5 minutes. He grabbed my arm. Hard. Outside, the conference room door slammed behind us. His voice dropped immediately. Have you lost your mind? I gently removed his hand from my sleeve. No. Then explain this. I changed my decision. Today. Yes. After everything? After everything. His eyes narrowed. Is another company recruiting you? No. Then why? Because I already know how this story ends. Because you'll erase my name. Because you'll convince the world I betrayed you. Because I'll die believing hard work alone protects honest people. Instead, I simply said, I don't want to build Nova Forge. He laughed once, coldly. Without you, this company doesn't exist. Then don't build it. His face went pale. You think you're irreplaceable. I know what I contributed. We're partners. We're. He stepped closer. Listen carefully. If you walk away today, you'll regret it. I searched his face. Young, ambitious, desperate. I wondered whether betrayal had always lived inside him, or whether success would awaken it later. Either answer no longer mattered. I won't regret leaving. I turned toward the elevator. Ethan. His voice echoed across the hallway. If this startup becomes worth billions, don't come back. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. He stood outside, breathing heavily. The doors slowly closed between us. For a brief second, our reflections overlapped in the mirrored steel. The man I used to be. The man I had become. Then Adrian disappeared. The elevator descended quietly. When the doors opened into the lobby, sunlight flooded across the marble floor. People hurried past with laptops and coffee cups. The entire city buzzed with possibility. For the first time in what felt like 2 lifetimes, I wasn't chasing someone else's future. I walked out of the building without looking back. Behind me, somewhere dozens of floors above, investors were waiting for a presentation that would never happen the way history remembered it. Ahead of me lay an empty street, an empty future, and this time, it belonged to me alone. The spring air felt strangely light, not because my problems had disappeared, because, for the first time in years, perhaps in 2 lifetimes, I wasn't carrying someone else's dream on my back. I crossed the street and sat on a bench overlooking the river. Traffic hummed. People laughed. A street musician played an old jazz melody. Everything looked ordinary. Yet I knew history had just split into 2 completely different futures. My phone vibrated. Adrian calling. I rejected it. It rang again. Rejected. Again. Again. On the 5th attempt, the screen finally went dark. I leaned back. He wasn't calling because he cared. He was calculating. Without me, the investor meeting had collapsed. Without the system architecture, Nova Forge wasn't a startup. It was only a pitch deck. I smiled faintly. That had never been obvious in my first life. Now it was. By evening, I returned to my tiny apartment. The place looked exactly as I remembered. Secondhand furniture, a folding dining table, a whiteboard covered in equations, boxes filled with notebooks. The sight almost stopped my breathing. Every notebook contained ideas I had once poured into Nova Forge. This time, they would remain mine. I opened the first notebook. The earliest page held an unfinished sentence. Adaptive Supply Intelligence Platform. I remembered exactly why I had abandoned it. Adrian had insisted investors preferred logistics software. We need something easier to sell. I had compromised. Again and again, until the company no longer reflected my ideas. Only his ambition. Not this time. I slowly crossed out the old title. Underneath, I wrote 3 new words. Atlas Cognitive Systems. Not a logistics company. An infrastructure company. A platform that would help businesses predict manufacturing failures before they happened. 5 years ahead of the market. 5 years ahead because I already knew where technology was going. A loud knock interrupted my thoughts. Ethan, my younger sister, Claire, stood outside carrying grocery bags. She frowned immediately. You look terrible. I've had a strange day. She stepped inside. Adrian called me. Of course he had. What did he say? He said you're having some kind of breakdown. I laughed. Claire blinked. I've never heard you laugh at his name before. I've never had a reason. She unpacked vegetables into my refrigerator. You've spent 2 years building that company. I know. And now you quit during the funding meeting? Yes. She folded her arms. Why? I wanted to tell her everything. The courtroom. The betrayal. The explosion. The second life. Instead, I asked quietly, Claire, if someone showed you exactly how your future ends, would you still walk toward it? She stared. That's a weird question. I know. No. She answered honestly. I'd run. I smiled. So am I. She didn't understand. But somehow, she accepted the answer. The next morning, Adrian appeared outside my apartment. He hadn't shaved. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes. He looked exhausted. I've been calling. I noticed. You embarrassed us. I left. You destroyed our funding. No. I unlocked my mailbox. The company destroyed its funding. His jaw tightened. Stop playing with words. I'm not. He lowered his voice. The investors will reconsider. They won't. You don't know that. I looked directly into his eyes. I do. He froze. For a heartbeat, uncertainty crossed his face. Then anger replaced it. So that's it. You're throwing away everything? I never owned it. He stepped closer. I'll increase your equity. Interesting. In my previous life, he had refused when I asked for a written partnership agreement. Now he was negotiating. Because he needed me. I don't want more shares. I'll make you CTO. I don't want the title. What do you want? Freedom. I want nothing from Nova Forge. His expression became colder. You'll regret this. I've heard that before. His eyebrows knitted together. What does that mean? Nothing. He left without another word. But before entering his car, he looked back. Not with sadness. With calculation. That look sent a chill through me. History had changed. Adrian hadn't. 3 days later, the first rumor appeared online. Lead engineer leaves startup amid internal dispute. Nothing serious. Yet, by Friday, a second article surfaced. Sources claimed technical founder demanded majority control. False. Completely false. I closed the webpage. Silence. That was my answer. I refused to fight shadows. Because I remembered what happened when I tried defending myself. The louder I spoke, the easier it became for Adrian to twist my words. Not again. This time, silence would force him to expose himself. 2 weeks passed. Atlas Cognitive Systems officially existed. Only on paper. A rented office. For desks. 1 coffee machine. No employees. No customers. No investors. Yet somehow, it felt more real than Nova Forge ever had. Because every document carried one name. Mine. An unfamiliar woman arrived just after lunch. She wore a charcoal business suit and carried a leather portfolio. Ethan Brooks. Yes. She extended a business card. Maya Chun, Technology Investment Advisor. The name instantly stirred an old memory. In my previous life, Maya had become one of the country's most respected venture partners. 5 years from now. Right now, she was still building her reputation. I attended the Nova Forge pitch. I remember. You walked away. I did. She smiled slightly. Most founders cling to sinking ships. I wasn't the founder. Her eyes lingered on me. Interesting answer. She placed a folder on my desk. I've reviewed several patents recently. None impressed me. She slid another document forward. Until I found yours. I frowned. My patent. The predictive failure algorithm. My heartbeat skipped. In my previous life, Adrian had filed that patent under Nova Forge. I never received credit. This life, I had filed it myself 3 days after leaving. Months earlier than history. You moved quickly. I had time. No. She smiled knowingly. You moved like someone afraid another person would claim it. I said nothing. Sometimes silence revealed less than lies. Maya looked around the nearly empty office. No employees? Not yet. No investors? No. No product. Not finished. She laughed softly. Then why do I have the feeling you're the safest investment I've seen all month? I looked out the window. Because I've already watched this future happen once. Instead, I answered. I don't gamble. I prepare. She nodded slowly. I'd like to keep talking. Meanwhile, across town, Nova Forge wasn't doing well. An article appeared Monday morning. Seed funding delayed after technical concerns raised. Investors had requested another demonstration. Adrian couldn't deliver. He understood marketing, negotiation, networking, but building scalable systems? That had always been my work. He hired 3 engineers, then 5, then 8. None could recreate what had existed only inside my notebooks. The pressure mounted, exactly as I remembered, only much earlier. Claire visited that evening carrying takeout. She noticed the stack of legal folders. What's all this? Patents. She raised an eyebrow. Plural. I've been busy. She flipped through the applications. Her eyes widened. Ethan, how long have you been working on these? A long time. You never showed anyone? I made that mistake once. She laughed. I swear. Ever since quitting Nova Forge. You've changed. Better or worse? She studied me carefully. You don't panic anymore. You don't chase approval. You don't explain yourself. You just. She searched for the word. Decide. Her observation lingered long after dinner ended. She was right. The greatest difference between my 2 lives wasn't knowledge. It was permission. I no longer needed anyone's permission to believe in my own worth. Late that night, my phone lit up again. Unknown number. I answered. A calm male voice spoke. My name is Daniel Ross. The name struck me immediately. Former senior engineer. Brilliant. Quiet. In my previous life, Adrian had fired him after blaming him for one of my own architectural decisions. I heard you started a company. I did. I also heard you don't blame engineers for executive mistakes. A faint smile touched my lips. No, I don't. There was a long pause. Then Daniel asked one simple question. Are you hiring? Outside the office window, the city lights shimmered across the river. In my first life, I had spent years building another man's empire. This time, the first person to believe in my company wasn't an investor. It was someone who had also been discarded. And somehow, that mattered even more. Daniel Ross arrived 10 minutes early. He wore a faded blue shirt, carried an aging laptop bag, and paused before entering the office as though expecting someone to tell him he was in the wrong place. He reminded me of myself. Brilliant. Careful. Far too accustomed to being underestimated. You really came? I said. He smiled awkwardly. You sounded serious on the phone. I was. He looked around the office. For desks. One whiteboard. A few unopened boxes. This is smaller than I expected. For now. He nodded. I like small. I handed him a mug of coffee. I don't have HR. I don't have interview forms. I don't even have employee badges. So this isn't an interview. He looked confused. What is it? A conversation. He sat down. For nearly 2 hours, we talked. Not about salaries. Not about titles. About systems. About engineering. About mistakes. Daniel's eyes lit up whenever we discussed architecture. He wasn't someone who chased recognition. He chased elegant solutions. Exactly the kind of person I wanted beside me. Finally, I asked the question that mattered most. If a project fails, who do you blame first? He didn't answer immediately. My assumptions. A slow smile spread across my face. You're hired. He blinked. Just like that. Just like that. He laughed. I expected technical tests. I already know you're good enough. You've never worked with me. No. But I had watched history destroy someone exactly like him. That was enough. 3 days later, Atlas had its second employee. Then its third. A cybersecurity specialist named Priya Shah. She spoke little during meetings. But every time she did, everyone else stopped talking. Daniel leaned toward me after she left. Where did you find her? I didn't. She found us. Apparently, word had begun spreading. Not through advertisements. Not through recruiters. Through engineers. Quietly. One recommendation after another. People who had grown tired of companies where executives collected praise while developers carried blame. The culture was attracting them before the products did. That realization filled me with a strange warmth. Perhaps companies weren't built by ideas alone. Perhaps they were built by the people who finally felt safe enough to share them. 2 months passed. Atlas released its first prototype. A predictive maintenance platform for manufacturing plants. Nothing flashy. No dramatic product launch. No celebrity keynote. Only results. The first client, a small factory outside Chicago, reported a 38% reduction in equipment downtime within 6 weeks. The owner called personally. I thought your numbers were exaggerated. So did I. They weren't. When can we expand? I looked across the office. Daniel was sketching new optimization models. Priya was reviewing security reports. Claire had recently joined part-time to manage operations after leaving a job she hated. For the first time, the office felt alive. Not loud. Alive. Then my phone vibrated. Maya Chun. Ethan, you've seen today's news? No. Turn on the television. I picked up the remote. Every business channel carried the same headline. Nova Forge announces emergency executive restructuring. Adrian stood before dozens of cameras. He looked composed. Too composed. The recent delays have been exaggerated. Our technology remains industry-leading. I froze. The demonstration on the screen. The interface. The predictive visualization. Even the dashboard colors. Looked painfully familiar. Daniel noticed my expression. What happened? I muted the television. They copied us. Silence settled over the room. Priya crossed her arms. How? They've never seen our source code. No. I stared at the screen. But they've seen my mind. The product wasn't an exact copy. It couldn't be. They didn't know enough. Instead, Adrian had recreated fragments from memory. Ideas I had once explained over late-night coffee. Whiteboard discussions. Conversations from years before. Close enough to resemble Atlas. Different enough to deny theft. Legally, it was a gray area. Morally, it wasn't. Daniel spoke quietly. What do we do? I looked back at the television. Adrian smiled confidently as reporters applauded. Exactly like he had in my previous life. Only now, I wasn't standing behind him. I turned off the screen. We keep building. Nobody argued. The accusations arrived exactly 1 week later. Anonymous blog posts. Industry forums. Social media threads. Did Atlas steal NovaForge technology? The irony was almost unbearable. History wasn't repeating itself. It had simply changed sides. Daniel stormed into my office holding his tablet. This is ridiculous. I know. They're calling us copycats. I've seen. Say something. I shook my head. No. He stared at me. Why? Because truth doesn't become stronger by shouting. It becomes stronger through evidence. Priya entered moments later. I've been tracing the posts. She dropped a printed report onto my desk. They're coordinated. Paid accounts. Bot amplification. 3 marketing agencies. Daniel frowned. Can we prove who's paying them? Priya nodded once. Not yet. But they're sloppy. They always are. I looked at her. You've done this before. She smiled faintly. I've cleaned up messes created by executives who believed deleting emails erased history. For the first time that week. I laughed. Meanwhile, Atlas kept working. Another client signed. Then another. Not because of advertising. Because factories talk to factories. Engineers trusted engineers. Results spread faster than rumors. Revenue remained modest. But stable. Every contract felt earned. One rainy evening, Maya visited the office carrying a thick folder. I've made my decision. She placed it on the conference table. My fund wants to invest. Claire nearly dropped her coffee. Daniel looked stunned. I remained quiet. Before you celebrate, Maya continued. There's a condition. I raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. You remain CEO. Daniel looked confused. Why would that need to be a condition? Maya answered without hesitation. Because investors often replace technical founders. She looked directly at me. I won't. The room became silent. She had unknowingly touched the deepest wound of my previous life. Not just losing a company. Losing ownership of my own work. I slowly closed the folder. No special voting rights. No hidden clauses. No board trap. She smiled. I was hoping you'd read everything. I always do. You'd be surprised how many founders don't. I signed. Not because I desperately needed money. Because for the first time, someone wanted to invest in me. Not use me. Trust me. Across the city, NovaForge's headquarters buzzed with tension. Adrian slammed another report onto the conference table. Why are they still signing clients? His marketing director answered carefully. Their retention numbers are unusually high. What about ours? A long silence. Finally, our largest customer canceled. Adrian's face darkened. Why? They said. The executive hesitated. They trust Atlas engineers more. The room fell completely silent. Not because of the lost contract. Because everyone understood what that sentence really meant. Trust couldn't be purchased. It couldn't be marketed. And once lost, it was almost impossible to reclaim. Adrian slowly sat down. For the first time in either lifetime. He looked uncertain. Not defeated. Not yet. But uncertain. And uncertainty, once it entered a man who had built his identity on absolute confidence, had a way of growing quietly until it consumed everything. Rain drummed softly against the windows of Atlas headquarters as Priya walked into the conference room, carrying a gray storage box. She didn't speak immediately. That alone made everyone look up. Daniel closed his laptop. Claire put down her notebook. I noticed the tension in Priya's shoulders before she even placed the box on the table. I think, she said quietly, we've found the beginning. The beginning of what? Daniel asked. She removed 3 external hard drives and a stack of printed emails. NovaForge. The room became still. I felt an old ache stir in my chest. Not fear. Recognition. Priya connected one of the drives to the projector. Lines of metadata appeared across the screen. Email timestamps. Server logs. Document revisions. One of the marketing agencies Adrian hired had terrible cybersecurity practices. Daniel leaned closer. They left backups exposed. They left everything exposed. She clicked another file. An internal email appeared. Subject, narrative strategy. We need to establish Atlas as imitators before their second funding round. Another click. A payment record. 3 marketing firms. Hundreds of fake accounts. Thousands of coordinated posts. Claire whispered. So the rumors were purchased. Priya nodded. But that's not the important part. She opened another folder. This one contained engineering discussions, whiteboard photos, meeting transcripts, old design documents. I recognized every page because I had written them years ago, in this life, before leaving Nova Forge. They archived everything, Priya said, even brainstorming sessions. Daniel frowned. That doesn't prove theft. No. She smiled slightly. It proves intent. She enlarged one photograph. Adrian stood beside a whiteboard. Behind him, my handwriting, my diagrams, my predictive failure model. The date in the corner froze everyone. 2 weeks before Nova Forge publicly claimed they had invented the technology. Claire slowly looked toward me. You never showed this to anyone outside the company. I know. So, they can't claim independent creation. Priya nodded. And that's only the first folder. The legal team arrived that afternoon. Unlike the expensive firms Adrian preferred, Atlas's lawyers spent more time asking questions than making speeches. Lead counsel Margaret Ellis adjusted her glasses. I'll be honest. This case isn't simple. Daniel frowned. We have evidence. We have evidence of coordinated defamation. She tapped another file. But intellectual property disputes are different. I remained silent. She turned toward me. Mr. Brooks. Yes. I need to ask something uncomfortable. Go ahead. Did you ever sign ownership agreements with Nova Forge before resigning? I remembered. Every page. Every rushed signature. Every promise. We delayed formal assignment. Margaret looked surprised. You never transferred all your research. No. Priya smiled. I checked. The lawyer blinked. You checked. I verify everything. Margaret slowly closed the folder. Then this case just became very interesting. That evening I stood alone on the rooftop overlooking the city. 5 years ago, in another lifetime, this skyline represented failure. Tonight, it felt different. Not victorious. Simply honest. Footsteps approached behind me. Maya handed me a cup of coffee. You don't look happy. I thought I'd feel something. You don't. I feel. I searched for the right word. Tired. She nodded. People imagine justice feels exciting. It usually feels exhausting. We watched traffic flow below. After a long silence, she asked, if Adrian apologized tomorrow, would you forgive him? The question lingered in the cold air. Finally, I answered, I don't know. But forgiveness doesn't require rebuilding what he destroyed. Maya smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. The lawsuit became public 48 hours later. Every financial newspaper carried the headline. Atlas files multi-claim action against Nova Forge. Television analysts debated nonstop. Some called it corporate warfare. Others described it as a battle over innovation. None understood what it truly was. It wasn't revenge. It was consequence. The first hearing attracted so many reporters that security had to expand the courtroom. As I entered, flashes exploded from every direction. Ethan, did Nova Forge steal your work? Are you seeking damages? Will you settle? I answered none of them. Inside, Adrian stood with a team of expensive attorneys. He looked older than he should have. Success had once sharpened his confidence. Pressure had slowly hollowed it out. Our eyes met briefly. Neither of us spoke. The judge entered. The proceedings began. Nova Forge's lead attorney stood first. Our client categorically denies all allegations. Atlas is attempting to rewrite history after failing to compete fairly. Margaret didn't react. She simply waited. When our turn came, she approached the podium carrying only one folder. Your Honor, this case is not built upon accusations. It is built upon chronology. The courtroom lights dimmed. A timeline appeared. Patent filings, server records, whiteboard photographs, metadata. Every document arranged to the minute. One by one, the dates dismantled Nova Forge's narrative. Then came the final exhibit. Priya's forensic recovery. An internal executive email. Sent by Adrian himself. We need to move quickly before Ethan files independently. Silence. Complete silence. Even the reporters stopped typing. Adrian's attorney stood abruptly. Objection. Margaret looked toward the judge. The metadata has already been independently verified. The objection collapsed almost immediately. For the first time, I saw genuine panic cross Adrian's face. Not because the evidence existed, because he realized it had survived. Outside the courtroom, investors began calling. Not me. Nova Forge. Several requested emergency meetings. One board member resigned before sunset. Another publicly demanded an independent investigation. Employees started posting anonymous stories online. Long hours, manipulated records, credit stolen from engineering teams. Once one person spoke, others found the courage to speak as well. Truth spread differently than rumors. It moved slower, but it didn't need to shout. 3 weeks later, the independent investigation released its preliminary findings. Accounting irregularities, misleading investor communications, internal retaliation, questionable intellectual property practices. The board held an emergency vote. Adrian wasn't arrested. He wasn't dragged away in handcuffs. Something far quieter happened. He lost the only thing he had spent years protecting: authority. His resignation became effective immediately. No applause, no dramatic confrontation, just a short press release. Effective today, Adrian Cole has stepped down as Chief Executive Officer of NovaForge Technologies. I read it once, then placed the phone face down. Claire looked at me from across the office. That's it. I nodded. That's it. She seemed almost disappointed. No celebration? I smiled faintly. What would I be celebrating? She thought for a moment. Then she understood. NovaForge's collapse wasn't the destination. Leaving it had been. The company had stopped defining my life the moment I walked out of that elevator months earlier. Everything afterward was simply history catching up. Autumn arrived without anyone noticing. The lawsuits continued in conference rooms and court filings, but inside Atlas, life had quietly settled into a rhythm. The office no longer echoed. It hummed. Engineers argued over algorithms instead of office politics. Designers challenged product ideas without fearing retaliation. People stayed late because they wanted to solve problems, not because they were afraid to go home before the CEO. One Friday afternoon, Daniel looked around the engineering floor and laughed. What? He pointed toward the break area. Do you realize nobody's pretending to work? I followed his gaze. Two developers were debating database optimization over coffee. Claire was helping a new operations coordinator understand supplier contracts. Priya was patiently explaining encryption to an intern who looked terrified of asking questions. No one stopped talking because I had entered. No one stood up. No one rushed to look busy. I smiled. They trust this place. Daniel nodded. I've never worked anywhere like it. Neither had I. Not in either lifetime. That evening, Atlas welcomed its 50th employee. Instead of renting a luxury restaurant, Claire insisted on ordering pizza. You're kidding, Daniel groaned. We just closed a $40 million funding round. And we can afford something nicer. Claire folded her arms. When there are 100 employees, what happens then? We'll order better pizza. Laughter filled the office. The newest engineer looked confused. Is this really how you celebrate? Claire grinned. We celebrate surviving another week without becoming the kind of company we escaped. Everyone raised their drinks. Even Priya smiled. It wasn't glamorous. It was genuine. Later that night, I remained alone in the conference room. The city lights reflected against the glass. 5 years ago. No, 5 years from my first life. At this point, I would have been sleeping under my desk while Adrian prepared another investor presentation using slides I had built. Instead, I opened a notebook, not filled with emergency fixes, not with crisis plans, just ideas. Ideas no one could take away. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Maya stepped inside. I guessed you'd still be working. I was thinking, that's usually more dangerous. She handed me a folder. There's another acquisition opportunity. I glanced at the documents. A struggling software company. Talented engineers. Terrible leadership. It reminded me of dozens of businesses that had collapsed because management treated people like replaceable parts. What do you think? She asked. I think. I closed the folder. If we buy them, everyone keeps their jobs. She smiled. I knew you'd say that. You already negotiated that, didn't you? I may have suggested it. I laughed. You planned this. I invested in you because I understood one thing. And what's that? You don't collect companies. You rescue people trapped inside them. Her words stayed with me long after she left. Over the next year, Atlas expanded steadily. Not explosively. Deliberately. Every new office followed the same rule. Transparent salaries. Shared technical credit. Open financial reporting. No hidden executive bonuses. Whenever investors complained, I politely invited them to invest elsewhere. Surprisingly, most stayed, because stability had become more valuable than spectacle. One morning, Claire walked into my office carrying financial reports. You should look at this. I skimmed the numbers. Revenue had doubled again. Profit margins remained healthy. Cash reserves exceeded every forecast. Daniel entered moments later. Our manufacturing clients just renewed every enterprise contract. All of them. Every single one. I leaned back. In my previous life, growth had always felt like sprinting across thin ice. This felt different. Solid. Earned. Real. 5 years passed. The anniversary wasn't marked by speeches or celebrations. Most people in the office didn't even realize the date. Only I remembered. Because exactly 5 years ago, I had walked away from Nova Forge. Exactly 5 years ago. History had changed. Claire entered carrying her tablet. You should probably see this. She placed it on my desk. A commercial real estate listing filled the screen. At the top was a familiar address. I stared. Nova Forge headquarters. The building where Adrian had once told me, if this startup becomes worth billions, don't come back. Claire watched my expression carefully. The bank finally foreclosed. I see. The property's going to auction next month. Silence settled between us. I thought you'd want to know. I appreciate it. She hesitated. Are you thinking what I think you're thinking? No. She blinked. I'm thinking about parking. Parking. The building never had enough. Claire burst into laughter. You've become impossible. The auction attracted dozens of investment groups, commercial developers, private equity firms, corporate buyers. I sat quietly beside Maya. Neither of us spoke during the opening bids. The auction climbed steadily. 40 million. 48. 52. Several bidders dropped out. Maya leaned toward me. Still interested? Yes. Emotionally? No. Good. The number reached 63 million. Another bidder hesitated, then withdrew. The auctioneer looked around the room. Any further offers? Maya glanced at me. I nodded once. She raised her paddle. 65 million. The room fell silent. The auctioneer counted. Once. No response. Twice. Still nothing. Sold. The gavel struck. A strange calm washed over me. Not triumph. Closure. 1 week later, I stood inside the empty lobby. The marble floors remained spotless. The glass walls reflected the afternoon sun exactly as they had years before. I walked slowly toward the elevator. Memories surfaced one after another. The funding meeting. The argument. The closing elevator doors. The promise I had made to myself. I won't build his startup again. I pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. This time, I stepped inside as the owner of the building. Not because I had chased revenge, because I had built something better. Daniel joined me on the top floor. What are we doing with this place? I looked across the empty executive offices. No executive floor. He smiled. I like that answer. We'll convert it. Into what? Engineering. He laughed. You're serious. The people creating value deserve the windows. As workers began removing the old executive nameplates, I noticed one final plaque still hanging outside the largest office. Adrian Cole, Chief Executive Officer. I removed it myself. There was no anger, no satisfaction, only quiet acceptance. The office no longer belonged to the man who had tried to own my future. It belonged to everyone who would build a better one together. The winter sun cast long shadows through the newly renovated headquarters. The old executive floor no longer existed. Where polished mahogany walls had once separated executives from engineers, there were now open workspaces, whiteboards filled with equations, prototype labs, and quiet corners where teams debated ideas over coffee. Daniel stood beside a floor-to-ceiling window. I still can't believe this used to be the CEO's office. It didn't. He frowned. I smiled. It used to belong to one man. Now it belongs to everyone. He nodded. Better. Across the room, a group of interns crowded around Priya as she demonstrated a new security framework. Nobody seemed intimidated by her anymore. Instead, they asked questions. Lots of them. She answered every one patiently. Claire walked over carrying a stack of invitations. The Innovation Foundation approved our proposal. Already. She handed me the letter. Atlas would officially launch a nonprofit engineering scholarship for students from low-income families. Not because it would generate publicity, because years ago, someone had once believed in me when I couldn't afford to believe in myself. I signed the approval immediately. Claire smiled. No board meeting? No. No committee? No. She laughed. I love owning our own company. So do I. That afternoon, the receptionist called. Ethan, there's someone here asking to see you. Who? She hesitated. He says his name is Adrian Cole. The room became silent. Daniel looked toward me. Claire slowly lowered her coffee. Neither spoke. I simply nodded. Send him in. Adrian entered alone. No lawyers. No assistants. No expensive watch. His suit was clean but worn. His hair had begun turning gray around the temples. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. He looked around the office. You changed everything. We renovated. I meant. He stopped himself. I know. I gestured toward 2 chairs. He sat carefully. Not confidently. Carefully. I heard about the scholarship. It's starting next semester. He nodded absent-mindedly. You always cared more about people than I did. I didn't answer. After a long silence, he finally spoke again. I came to apologize. The words hung between us. I don't expect forgiveness. You shouldn't. He lowered his eyes. I know. I've replayed everything. The contracts. The investors. The lies. I kept telling myself I had no choice. His voice cracked. But I always had one. I watched him quietly. The younger version of myself would have demanded explanations. This version didn't need them. He reached into his briefcase and placed a small notebook on the table. I recognized it immediately. The old notebook from our apartment. The one where we had sketched impossible dreams together. I found it while cleaning storage. I thought, it belonged to you. I slowly opened it. The first page still carried our handwriting. One sentence stood out. Let's build something we're proud of. For a moment, I remembered 2 young men sharing instant noodles at 2 in the morning, convinced talent and determination were enough to change the world. One of them had changed. The other had lost himself along the way. I was proud once, Adrian whispered. I just forgot why. I closed the notebook gently. You know, I said quietly, I spent years wondering what I'd say if I ever saw you again. Adrian looked up. I imagined arguments. Questions. Anger. He waited. But somewhere along the way, I stopped rehearsing. He swallowed hard. I deserve that. This isn't about what you deserve. It isn't. No. I stood and walked toward the window overlooking the city. When I first left Nova Forge, I thought success meant proving you wrong. It doesn't. He remained silent. Success, I continued, is waking up without hating the work waiting for you. It's trusting the people beside you. It's never asking someone to sacrifice their name so yours can shine. Behind me, Adrian quietly wiped his eyes. I don't know how to start over. I turned back. You start the same way everyone else does. One honest decision. Then another. They're usually small, but they add up. He laughed weakly. You still sound like an engineer. I take that as a compliment. For the first time since entering the room. He smiled. Not the polished smile investors loved. Not the confident smile that once hid ambition. Just a tired, human smile. He stood. I won't bother you again. I know. At the door, he paused. Ethan. Yes. Thank you. For hearing me. I nodded once. Then he left. There was no dramatic embrace. No restored friendship. Some bridges could be acknowledged without being rebuilt. Months later, Atlas hosted its annual engineering conference. Unlike the event where I had once been escorted out by security, this stage looked different. No giant portraits. No worship of founders. Only teams. Projects. Ideas. Claire stepped to the microphone. Our CEO insists on giving credit away. The audience laughed. So this year, we're ignoring him. More laughter. She turned toward me. Ethan Brooks. Reluctantly, I walked onto the stage. The applause filled the hall. It sounded familiar, yet completely different. Years ago, applause had celebrated the wrong person. Today, it celebrated hundreds of people who had built something together. I looked across the audience. Daniel, Priya, Maya, engineers, designers, interns, factory owners whose businesses had survived because of Atlas's technology, students who would receive scholarships next year, families, dreamers, people who had chosen integrity over shortcuts. I took a slow breath. In another life. I almost said. Instead, I smiled. Thank you. The applause faded. The lights dimmed. Outside, snow began falling softly over the city. Inside, laughter echoed through the building that had once symbolized betrayal. Now it represented something entirely different. Not revenge. Not victory. A choice. The day I refused to build his startup again wasn't the day his story ended. It was the day mine finally began. The end.